from Sandy Alderson yesterday at the top of the show is because it strongly contradicts the big story in baseball today. A statement from CAA's Brodie Van Wagenen, who represents lots of top talent in the league, including Yoenis Cespedes, Noah Syndergaard, and Jacob deGrom. Here's what he said. The behavior of owners in this year's free agent market has changed dramatically. It feels coordinated, rightly or wrongly. Many club presidents and general managers with whom we negotiated with are frustrated with the lack of funds to sign the plethora of good players still available, raising further suspicion of institutional influence over the spending. Bottom line, the players are upset. No, they are outraged. Players in the midst of long-term contracts are as frustrated as those still seeking employment. Their voices are getting louder, and they are uniting in a way not seen since 1994.
Thrown in the 1994.
There is a rising tide among players for radical change. A fight is brewing, and it may begin with one, maybe two, and perhaps 1,200 willing to follow. A boycott of spring training may be a starting point. That's key if behavior doesn't change. Sign them, play them, celebrate them, and then sit back and let them entertain us the way they have more than 100 years. Jim, you know Brodie well.
I do.
Why now for him to do this?
Well, I think there's a lot of factors. First off, he is right in taking the temperature of his players that he represents and others throughout the game. There's been a lot of conversation around the game of why this is going on. He doesn't have a lot of players that are free agents currently right now, nor does he have any high-profile guys. Cespedes, obviously, over the last couple of years, and he kind of felt this a little bit with Cespedes along the way. But this is more, you know, it's obviously because of how many are out there. It's a larger number. So I think, and he's looked at as one of the big-time agents and one of the leaders in the industry. And there have been multiple memos and emails, I was told by Matt Holliday today on my radio show, about conversations about what to do about this slow market. And I think he is a part, you know, they're looking at him as kind of a leader among the agents. Scott Boras is another one. We're looking for some kind of direction. And I think this, you know, I would not take what he said today lightly.
And in the past week, Kenley Jansen, normally very level-headed, basically used the word strike for the first time. It's the first time a player has said that. Do you think, I mean, Brodie Van Wagenen is talking about spring training boycotts.
Right.
Are we closer to an actual strike, perhaps?
Well, the question, talking to people around the game today, Doug, remains, is this a negotiating tactic to leverage some owners into signing players to avoid this kind of tension? But as Jim said, Brodie is like one of the most respected, calm guys in the game. So for him to come out like this shows the level of anger that's coming from his their membership, his clients, other people's clients, guys who are going to be out of work, not the J.D. Martinez's of the world, but the Matt Hollidays, the Jason Wirths, the guys who don't have jobs. I think we're talking about a level of labor unrest in baseball that's unparalleled in this generation, because you have players who have never seen collusion, who have never seen there being no free agency, and who went with Tony Clark in the last bargaining agreement to look at, like, I want an extra seat on the bus. I don't want as many Sunday night games, lifestyle stuff. And now they're going, oh, no. Free agency is weak, and they're scrambling now. So we are looking at the era of labor peace that we've been used to for a long time now, Wayne, is certainly coming to a close, and it's going to get a lot uglier.
Yeah, and you mentioned some key words there, collusion being one of them, something that's going to be almost impossible at this juncture for them to prove that is happening. Another thing, Tony Clark and the Players Union, maybe that's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. This is not a labor lawyer by any stretch of the imagination. This is a former player that is going to bat for the players. This is how they wanted it. They wanted some of those amenities that you mentioned. They've gotten those, but now in some of the things they really could have gotten, like money, the thing they really want the most, it's going the other way. And as far as where the pressure should be and who is really backed into a corner, I still think it's the players right now. You know, 1994 is a shot, certainly, coming from Brodie, but I don't think the owners are sweating yet.
The players, if you take a long-range historical view of this, guys, the players are in a worse spot than they've been in a long time. They put themselves there, of course. The owners were in charge of this game for a century, and they held all the power. There was a reserve clause. The players fought 40 years ago to get that removed, and then just so much time elapsed, and they put, with Tony, to your point, Wayne, a player in charge. Tony's a bright guy. He's a good guy. But there have been questions about whether he's the guy to be at that negotiating table ever since he took over. And now that they're not even midway through this current agreement, there's obviously just I don't think we can overemphasize how much anger the players feel. It's not pointed at Clark yet, but I'll be interested to see if it gets there if the next couple of years are rough.
And I'm going to read that Tony Clark statement in just a second, but I just want to ask, because we talk about collusion, and I'm wondering if it is as formal as all the owners, Jim, talking like, hey, we don't want to give out these huge contracts, let's make sure nobody gives them out? Or is it just as informal as all the owners basically kind of non-verbally communicating about the fact that they're smarter now? They've realized that these things don't work. That's why they're not going to give them out.
Right. We've had years and years of looking at these long-term contracts and seeing that for the most part they don't work. So that's in the data. A lot of teams are valuing players the same way. When you talk to executives around the game, they talk more about player valuation rather than evaluation, rather than the baseball part. So that's a very similar. The age curve we've seen now that the PEDs era is kind of behind us. We see that the age curve when you're 32, 33 years old, you're starting to see the steep decline. So the teams are smarter about spending their money.
And tanking in some cases.
And there's a lot of tanking going on, too. I think this is a perfect storm. It's definitely not collusion. I can tell you for sure it's not collusion. They would be, by the way, at risk of triple damages, which is what happened back in the late 80s. It would be a huge number. They would never risk that. But I do think that there's a lot of other factors involved. Five or six important factors of why this market is so slow.
Two big factors to me. One of them is kind of what Jim touched on. There is a groupthink in Major League Baseball amongst executives. All 30 teams now have the same exact idea of what it takes to win a World Series. And the fans are complicit because the Houston Astros and the Chicago Cubs won World Series after completely tanking and blowing up their entire organizations. It's almost like fans now are the accountants for owners. They're so pro-owner. I think the Mets fans are the exception to that. But I think that there are so many fans that just don't care. Hey, you lose a few years, the White Sox lose a few years, and we'll catch you on the other side.
You make a great point there, Wayne, is that these teams have somehow been able to sell this trust the process thing, and you can go into the tank for a couple of years and the fans go, oh, they get into the prospects. That's a whole other thing that has helped teams here. Sure. And I agree with you, Jim, that the owners are too smart probably to go back on actually getting in a room and colluding. But make no mistake, a lot of these teams have been owned by families or inherited it, or there's a lot of deep tradition here, and there's probably a lot of resentment among those 30 owners about the institution of free agency and the Players Association, and they smell blood in the water now with that association. So a lot going on there.
It occurs to me we're probably one of many television shows today talking about memos and collusion for a couple of reasons.
We got a different look
We
here.
mentioned Tony Clark. He's, by the way, just a reminder, the head of the Players Association. He released this response a little over an hour ago. For decades, free agency has been the cornerstone of baseball's economic system and has benefited players and the game alike. Each time it has been attacked, players and their representatives and the association have united to defend it. That will never change. Much more on all of this on the other side of a break. Stay with us.